What are advisory circulars? Non-regulatory information of interest to the aviation public. What publication would you consult to determine an aircraft's or engines or propellers type, design, and its limitations? TCDS, type certificate datasheets, or aircraft specification. In what FAA publication could you find a list of engines approved for use in a specific make and model of airplane? In the type certificate datasheets and/or aircraft specifications. What reference material can be used to determine if an aircraft is certificate in more than one category? The TCDS. What is the name of the manual that the manufacturer provides to technicians who normally perform work on the systems and components of an aircraft? The Aircraft Maintenance Manual. Under what circumstances is compliance with a manufacturer's service bulletin mandatory? Under what circumstances is compliance with a manufacturer's service bulletin mandatory? When the service bulletin is incorporated into an AD or other approved data. What kind of publication are used by aircraft manufacturers to notify owners of design defects and product improvements? Service bulletins, service letters, and service instructions. If you need to determine the serviceable dimensional limits for an engine part, what publication would you consult? The current engine manufacturer's overhaul manual. How often is the summary of an ADS published? Every 2 years. As a certificate mechanic, will you automatically receive all ADs? No, ADs are automatically sent only to registered aircraft owners. How are AD updates issued to subscribers to the Summary of Airworthiness Directive? Through biweekly supplements. Where do you find the minimum scope and detailed requirements that a 100-hour inspection checklist must contain? FAR Part 23 Appendix D. Records of a major alteration must be made in what two places. The aircraft maintenance records in the FAA Form 337. When completion of FAA Form 337 is required, how many copies are normally prepared and what is their distribution? Two copies, two signed copies, one to the aircraft owner and the other one to the FAA, within 48 hours to approve return to service. When an aircraft is sold, what do the regulations require regarding the disposition of records that contain the current status of airworthiness directives? The seller must be transferred the records to the buyer at the first time of sale. For what period of time must an aircraft owner maintain the records of a 100-hour inspection? Until the work is superseded, which means reemplazado, or 1 year after inspection. In what publication may a mechanic find an example of a maintenance record entry for a 100-hour inspection? FAR Part 4311. Where should a 100-hour inspection be recorded? in the appropriate maintenance record for the airframe, power plant, propeller, or appliance. What items must be entered into the aircraft records after maintenance is performed? Description of the work performed, the date of work completed, reference table data, the signature, certificate number, and type of certificate that the person approved return to service. What person makes the final maintenance record entry after a 100-hour inspection is completed? The person approving the aircraft return to service. What documents must be prepared when a required inspection is performed and defects are found which render the aircraft or engine unairworthy? Required maintenance entries must be made, and lists of discrepancies and unworthy items to furnish the owner. What maintenance record entries are required to contain the aircraft's total time in service? Only records of inspection required the total time. What regulation authorizes a certificate mechanic who holds an inspection authorization to approve or disapprove a major repair or alteration? What regulation authorizes a certificate mechanic who holds an inspection authorization to approve or disapprove a major repair or alteration? FAR 6595. Who has the authority to rebuild an aircraft engine and return the operating time to zero? Only the engine manufacturer or overhaul facility approved by the manufacturer. Are there any circumstances when more than 2 copies of a Form 337 are required, and if so, when? Yes, 3 copies are required when a fuel tank is installed in the passenger or baggage compartment. The third copy must be kept aboard to the aircraft. How do regulations define time in service in regard to maintenance record entries? When the aircraft leaves the Earth's surface until touch the next point of landing. What are the penalties for making fraudulent or intentionally false entries in any required record or report? Certificate suspended or revoked. What persons are authorized to make the required maintenance entry approving the return to service after a progressive inspection is performed at a location other than the aircraft's home base? An applicable certificate mechanic, an appropriate rated repair station, or the aircraft manufacturer. What is the difference between terms overhaul and rebuilding as they pertain to aircraft engine maintenance records? An overhauled engine must be tested to approve current standard and technical data, but a rebuilt engine must be tested to the same tolerance and limits as a new engine. When performing an inspection required by the FAA Part 91, what rotorcraft system must be inspected in accordance with the manufacturer's maintenance manual or instruction for continued airworthiness? The drive shafts or similar systems, the main rotor transmission gearbox, the main rotor and center section, and the auxiliary rotor on helicopters. How can you determine that an aircraft part or appliance you receive is serviceable? by approval for return to service in the maintenance records with a completed Form 337. Mechanic privileges and limitations. What publication should a mechanic consult to determine if a repair is considered as a major repair or minor repair? FAR Part 23, Part 43, Appendix A. FAR Part 43, Appendix A. Where in the FARs will you find the certification requirements for a mechanic? FAR Part 65. What are the ratings issued under a mechanic certificate? Airframe and power plant. What type of work may a certificate mechanic perform? A mechanic may perform or supervise maintenance, preventive maintenance, or alterations. Is a certificate airframe mechanic allowed to perform maintenance on engines? Not unless they are supervised by a certificated power plant mechanic. What are the limitations to a mechanic's privileges with regard to propellers? A mechanic may not perform major repairs or alteration on propellers. Is a mechanic allowed to repair or alter an aircraft instrument? No. Mechanics may not perform any repairs or alteration on instruments. What are the requirements for recent experience in order to exercise the privileges of your mechanic certificate or rating? You must work as a mechanic or supervise for 6 months out of the past 24 months. What authority does a mechanic have regarding approval for return to service? A mechanic can approve an aircraft, airframe, engine, propeller to return to service regard to the FAA Part 65. What are the privileges of an A&P mechanic regarding inspections? A mechanic may perform and approve for return to service an engine or airframe after 100-hour inspection. What is the duration of a mechanic certificate? The certificate is valid until surrendered, suspended, or revoked. What are the privileges and limitations of an A&P mechanic regarding major repairs and alteration to airframes and engines and their approval for return to service? An A&P can perform but not approved unless he has an inspection authorization. In addition to performing maintenance, what other privileges are granted to a power plant mechanic? A power plant mechanic may perform 100-hour inspections and engine and approve for return to service. When may a mechanic perform an annual inspection and return the aircraft to service? When the mechanic holds an inspection authorization. May a mechanic supervise an inspection or a portion of an inspection and then approve the aircraft for return to service? No, the mechanic approving the aircraft for return to service must actually perform the inspection. What is the duration of a temporary airman's certificate? $120. If a mechanic certificate is revoked, how long must he or she wait before applying for a new certificate? One year unless the revocation order states otherwise. What should a mechanic do if his or her temporary certificate is about to expire? Contact a local FAA office and seek assistance. Is a person with a private pilot certificate allowed to perform maintenance, and if so, what are his or her limitations? The pilot may perform preventive maintenance in accordance with the FAR Part 43.3 to Part 43.7 Appendix A on aircraft owned by the pilot. They can approve the aircraft for return to service following that maintenance. What are your requirements as an aircraft mechanic when you have a change of address? You must notify the FAA in writing within 30 days of any change to your permanent address. Y eso es, papi. Hemos terminado.